Hey, all right, I'm back and we're continuing on with the parable series. And we're going to talk a little bit about the parable that Jesus gave in Matthew 7:24 through 27, where he talked about the person building their house on the rock versus the person building their house on the sand. So Matthew 24 through 27 says, "Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." So it's actually a pretty straightforward parable. Not a whole lot to figure out here. Basically, Jesus is saying that the people who hear his teachings and actually do them are building their lives on a rock, a sure foundation. And rocks, firm foundations, they can weather the storms. They can, make it through. They never change, and they can support what's being built on them. The people who hear Jesus's teachings and don't do them, they ignore them, put them to the side, just pretend they don't exist, whatever, or maybe even talk about them but don't do them. They're building their lives on the foundation of sand, putting a house right on the beach. And that's going to shift, that's going to change, and eventually it's just going to give way and fall apart. And we've all seen these videos of houses, during hurricane season, they'll always show houses that are built right on the beach, and when the hurricane waves come, it just rips the house apart and drags it out into the ocean. This is what Jesus is talking about. This is the image Jesus is portraying, about people that are building their lives on shifting sands, on things that are not a firm foundation. And we're seeing this in our culture today. Not specifically houses being torn apart, but people building their lives on shaky foundations. You see, there's an epidemic of people that are building their morality or their sense of what is right and wrong based on the culture and whatever the culture is saying is right or wrong. And that's constantly changing and that's constantly shifting. And so there are people that are out there that one day are saying this is right and this is wrong, and then the next day they're changing their minds and saying this is right or wrong. And you're even finding people that are saying they're championing for something that they believe is right, only to have the culture come back and tell them later on that they're wrong. But when you build your morality on something that never changes, which would be the Word of God, Jesus's teachings, and you actually adhere by and live by those teachings, you're building your life on a rock, and it will never change, and it can weather the storms of life. And even when the culture comes against you and says, hey, that's not what we're currently telling you is right or wrong, it doesn't really matter, because you can stand, because your life has a foundation. And there's a lot of people who think, if I don't adhere to the culture, then I'm going to be rejected, and I'm going to be an outcast, and my life is going to fall apart. But the Bible actually promises the opposite of that. It says that, well, you may get rejected by people, but it says that when we build our foundation and our purpose for living and our reason for living and our moral and our worldview on biblical teachings, on the Word of God, what Jesus says, that is a foundation that can weather any storm. It won't change, and it sets us up for success. And so it's why people are so confused today. It's why parents are taking their kids to drag shows and believing that they're doing what's right and good. It's why different states are legalizing drugs and actually considering legalizing hard drugs. It's why looting becomes heroized. And it's why children's toys are being made that depict the occult. It's because people don't know what's right and wrong anymore, because they're built this entire moral system of belief on shifting sands, on a culture that's constantly changing. And when we go back and put our sense of morality and what's right and wrong on Jesus's teachings, and we build our lives on the foundation of, his rock, his word, and we do that and live by it, we're no longer confused. We know. We can take a stand and say, I know this is right and wrong. And guess what? 10 years later, 20 years later, 100 years later, well, I probably won't be talking in 100 years, but if I could, I would still be saying the same thing, because his word never changes. It's a rock. And when you build on it today, it'll be here tomorrow. As believers, it's imperative that we build our lives on the rock, that we put our lives on the moral teachings of Jesus Christ, and we actually do them. And it's not that hard. Choose to have a biblical worldview. Hear His word and live by it. And just choose to live by the Bible and not the world. And when the world comes and says, hey, do this, do this, do this, believe that, you have something to fall back on and go, no, this is what I believe. I will always believe this. This is what God has said to me. So I hope you enjoyed this. This wasn't that difficult of a parable. Probably most of you already know what this meant, and I didn't show you anything new, but I hope you have a blessed week. And if you want to see any more teachings or find out anything else about us, we're Reborn Church. You can go to rebornjacks.com, find us on YouTube, whatever, and I will see you next week. Bye.